Item 19. Now, I'm sure this is the big item that most of the public has called in for. And so I want the public to know that we will take public comments. If you want to make a public comment, you push *6 and state your first and last name. I'll say your first and last name. Bill Smith, go ahead. You have the floor. You have 2 minutes to make a public comment. If you have individual questions on how things are going to impact you, we want individual questions emailed to admin@ksera.org, and we can put those under the FAQs. Amy, you have a comment?
Mr. Chair, just a quick correction. It's actually administration spelled out @ksera.org. Thank you.
My bad. Administration spelled out, all one word, @ksera.org. And again, you push *6 to unmute your mic. All right, administrative matters. Item 19, discussion and appropriate action on proposed designation of special pays, presented by Executive Director Dominic Brown and General Counsel Jennifer Zari. Recommendation is to approve, take other action as appropriate. Mr. Brown, would you like to start first?
Yes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Good afternoon. So agenda item number 19 does have a cover memo on it. And so to introduce this item, first of all, I just wanted to express my thanks to a number of folks. One is our plan sponsors and the labor groups that have been extremely accommodating, really helped us to understand these pay codes. This decision came down on July 30, and staff has been very, very busy engaging a lot of folks. We appreciate all of them helping us out to make sure that we understand the pay codes so that we could categorize them correctly and match them up to the law. Also want to thank our members. This is a very big case that impacts a lot of our members. We have sent out numerous communications. I realize some of them probably seemed a little bit scary at first. We tried to get the most accurate and up-to-date information into people's hands as quickly as we possibly could so that they would have as much information as early as possible. So I realize that probably created some additional concern, but it was all for a good reason, which is to get people aware of this so that they could track it and sort of learn along with us and understand what the impacts would be. Lastly, I want to thank the staff. Staff has worked so hard on this issue the last several weeks and really put in a lot of extra time and effort to get the product that we have before your board today. So thanks for the patience and understanding for our members if we struggled to implement this decision. So we developed the special pay code tracker that is on our website, now included in the agenda materials. I wanted to briefly, for the benefit of the members, go over all of the efforts that staff has made over the last couple of weeks. So we created a new web page on our website for the Alameda decision. We held a special meeting on August 24th just to introduce the topic and go over what it was, as well as consider the resolution to direct staff to implement the decision. So we prepared a communication plan for the members for handling, logging, elevating calls, emails. We developed an FAQ, put that on our website. We reviewed 208 unique pay codes, conferred with outside counsel, which are both here today. Ashley Dunning from Nossaman is here, following up on last month to advise your board as fiduciary counsel. Also, Rob Goss and Audra are here as well from ICE Miller to advise the board on issues related to tax and our IRS qualified tax status. So we developed internal pay code trackers to help us analyze all 208 of these special pay codes, which is actually more like 416 because they might have different treatment for legacy folks than they do for PEPRA folks. We updated the portal, our member portal, to expose pensionable pay codes so that our members could actually log in and see which pay codes they had in their FAC and their final average compensation, which is a factor of their pension calculation, as well as by individual pay period. Staff held working meetings with human resources, management, and legal personnel from all of our impacted plan sponsors, including the county, hospital authority, courts, San Joaquin Air Pollution Control District, the Water Agency, Miranda Mesa, NOR Sanitation, and Buttonwillow Rec and Park to review affected pay codes, answer questions, understand their business practices, and to inform plan sponsors of what work we had performed up to date and what our plan was to bring this to your board. Also did outreach with all of the impacted labor groups, including the Firefighters Union, KCDOA, KLEA, Sheriff's Command Association, Probation Officers Association, REOKC, SEIU, and San Joaquin Employees Association. So we drafted and sent out numerous portal emails updating our membership with the most up-to-date information. I attended SACR's meetings with other administrators in our peer group to kind of compare notes and see where we are falling compared to our peers. And of course, we prepared this entire agenda and posted this agenda. So this has been a substantial undertaking just to get us where we are today. So there's a few documents, or there's numerous documents in the backup to this agenda material. Number one is the pay code tracker. That is the universal pay code document that has every single pay code that KSERA uses, that all of our 15 plan sponsors use, as well as how those were categorized pre-Alameda and how they are recommended to be treated post-Alameda. So our general counsel also put together a lengthy document analyzing every single pay code where we are recommending a change. I would not advise that council goes through every single one of those one by one, although we could do that if the board wanted to. I would suggest that we hold that. If there are individual questions, I'm sure that council would be happy to offer commentary on any code where there is a question and explain why it is that we are recommending the designation that we are recommending. Exhibit C has the stakeholder letters that we received. Some of them we got before print and they're included in your materials. Other ones were passed to your board as supplemental materials, and you have those to review. We also put copies to the stakeholder letters that were sent. So at this point, that does conclude staff's presentation on this issue. Staff is available for any comments or questions that your board or the public might have. Thank you.
General Counsel Jennifer Zara, do you have anything you want to add?
Hello.
Well, I'll just take the questions as Executive Director noted. The full information about the proposed designation, the sources of the description, the legal authority for the proposed designation is all listed in the slides. And so we'll take questions as needed by your board and public.
Okay, I will open it up to the board now. Any board member have any questions? I'm scrolling through here. No questions from the board. Okay. Very well then, I will open up to public comments. And what we'll do is you push *6 to unmute your mic. You state your first and last name. I will state your first and last name. Bill Smith, you have the floor for 2 minutes. Let's make sure that it is a public comment. We'll open public comments now. Do we have any member of the public that'd like to make a public comment?
Yes, I would. Janice Brown.
One at a time, state your first and last name.
Janice Brown.
J.
I was wondering,
State your first name.
I
There's
had
too many
mandatory.
Excuse me, ma'am. There's
What?
too many of you talking at one time. State your first
Okay.
name slowly, please, for the record.
Janice Brown.
Okay, Janice, Mrs. Brown, you have the floor for 2 minutes.
Okay. For one thing, I had to have mandatory overtime. I couldn't just leave my patients. I would have been fired if I left. So this was mandatory time, and I didn't use much overtime, maybe 6 hours per 80-hour pay period. And I would have been fired if I left because I had patients waiting to see me. And so I feel that it was mandatory. So I don't know why I'd be penalized. Another question, so I'd like to appeal that. And how would I go about doing that? Also, when is this going to take effect? And I understand that we have to pay this money back. And I'm wondering if the IRS is going to refund us because we paid, extra money. There's just a lot of questions here. and how's this, how would it affect my taxes? But more than that, my main thing is that I had mandatory overtime and I want to appeal it. How do I go about doing that? Thank you.
Mrs. Brown, I understand your frustration. There is an appeals process. If you want to appeal it, there is an administrative appeals process. And I would recommend that you, if that's the course of action you want to do, then you can appeal that. I would reach out to the K-Sarah office tomorrow, and they can get you through the process on that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And next public comment, please.
I'm going to mute myself.
State your first and last name, sir.
Philip J.
Mr. J, you have the floor for 2 minutes.
Thank you. I'm requesting that your board confirm that none of the Alameda matters affect people who retired before January of 2013. I listened to your last board meeting, and there were statements that people who retired before January 2013 would not be affected by any of this. In fact, your general counsel described that as a bright line. That is, if you retired before 2013, you are not affected. The reason I'm raising this question, me and several pre-2013 retirees have received emails from Casera informing us that our benefits are likely to be adjusted and reduce our monthly retirement benefit. I can't seem to get a definitive answer from staff on this. So my question is this a clerical error, or is there some other reason, something else going on that we are not aware of? And if this is going to affect pre-January 2013 retirees, I'd like to know the legal authority to proceed in that manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. J. Jennifer, did you want to comment real quickly on that?
Mr. Chairman, let's hold all questions till the end. We're making notes, and we'll try to address a lot of the comments and questions all in one sweep. Yeah.
That's fine. Next public comments, please.
Zachary Lopes.
You said, I'm sorry, Zachary, what's your last name?
Lopes.
Lopes. Okay, Mr. Lopes, you have the floor.
Thank you. My name is Zach Lopes. I'm an attorney at Rains, Lucia Stern, and we represent the Kern Law Enforcement Association and KLEA's members who are also members of K-Sarah. I believe the board members received a letter from our office dated September 4th, and KLEA is taking exception with two specific proposed pay codes that are marked for exclusion from compensation earnable for legacy members, and that is the Bomb Squad and the Canine Care Pay codes. It's not exactly clear to us why those two are being excluded from compensation earnable, but it appears that the board has determined or is poised to make a determination that those two items are standby or on-call pay. And our position is that is fundamentally misunderstands why those two pays are provided. Bomb Squad and Canine Care Pay are specialty allowances, and they're not for being on call or standby. Bomb Squad pay specifically is a special allowance for members because they are required to possess a bomb technician certificate, and they are required to perform hazardous duties as a normal part of their assignment. Canine Care Pay, on the other hand, is compensation for a built-in element of their regular schedules, which is taking care of their canine at home. This is a regular part of their duties. So our position is neither of those should be excluded. Neither are standby or on-call pay. And if the board does make that decision, we believe that's unlawful.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lopes.
Thank you very much.
You have a good day. I will move to the next public comment, please.
Mr. Chairman, if I can.
Yep.
Dodgen.
Yeah. Dustin, go ahead.
The second person on public comment asked a question that might eliminate several other public comments and carve out a group. Is that something that we might be able to address briefly now? Because it might save us some time.
Dominic, what would you want to do? Did you want to address it, or did you want to take them out at one time?
So with regard to the Alameda exclusions, this might lead to more questions, but I will say that it is our understanding, and fiduciary counsel or general counsel might comment further, PEPRA exclusions go back to January 1st, 2013. Alameda exclusions go back to inception. However, what we are proposing today is go forward changes. We are not proposing anything to the board that would involve any retroactivity at this point in time. That would be a subject for a future board meeting.
Okay. Was that what you were looking for, Dustin?
Yeah, so Alameda exclusions go back to exception. So it does affect everybody at all time, regardless of retirement date.
Yeah, so following up on the statement that was posed, if there was an Alameda exclusion, we did program the system to put those members on notice, just so that they would be aware that it was still an open question and an open issue. That's why we decided to do it in that way.
And the decision today will affect those people moving forward, if at all, depending on what the board decides to do.
Yes, that is what we are proposing. The pay code tracker is determinations of the pay codes with a go forward implementation from the effective date, which is August 30 for PEPRA exclusions and July 30 for Alameda exclusions.
Thank you.
Okay, next public comment.
And the legal,
State your first and last.
the legal,
State
Philip J. again, the legal authority for that to go to the beginning of time for Alameda exclusions. You have people who've been retired 15, 20 years. How far back are we going to go?
Jennifer.
And on what basis?
So this is the point I asked fiduciary counsel Ashley Dunning. I thought that there was significant interest in the Alameda exclusion issue, to say a few words to re-explain what she touched on last meeting about what exactly the Alameda exclusion is and how it's different from the actual PEPRA legislation, and how it's more about what should have been included in compensation from the beginning. So I will turn it over to Ashley to clarify that point. And I think that will answer your question, Mr. Day.
Ms. Dunning, would you also give just a brief introduction of yourself?
Certainly. My name is Ashley Dunning. I'm a partner at the Nossaman Law Firm, and I'm fiduciary counsel to the Casera Retirement Board and System. The proposed application of the Alameda exclusions is to apply them to people who retired on or after July 30th, 2020. So people who retired before July 30th, 2020 would not be impacted by the Alameda exclusions. The way in which the Alameda exclusions impact a larger group of people is that those who retire after July 30th, 2020 would no longer be eligible to have items included in their retirement allowance calculation that the Supreme Court said are not compensation, and therefore not compensation earnable nor pensionable compensation. The PEPRA exclusions apply to people who retired on and after January 1st, 2013. So again, if people retired before January 1st, 2013, they would not be impacted by this decision.
Does that clear things up?
No, I'm not. Now I'm even more confused. General counsel just said we would go back and revisit Alameda items for pre-2013 people, but not make them pay it back until sometime after 2020. I'm not sure how you can include items in a bill for people who retired well before this law even went into effect, and I'm not really hearing an answer there. What's the authority for that to go back to people who retired before 2013 and say they're now ineligible for items that were legal and vested for many, many years.
Just, Jennifer, if you want, so there is no going back to people who retired before January 1st, 2013 as a result of this Supreme Court decision. So I'm not,
Okay,
I can't speak to why you got an email on this, sir, but that's not what this case is about.
And I think the
Okay, and
confusion,
then I'm sorry.
the confusion initially, I think, well, not the confusion, but I guess the overabundance of caution was to address, because our board has not, or we have not brought a recommendation on proposed corrections yet to your board, and we had not yet heard from tax counsel, and we still don't have a recommendation before the board with regard to corrections, that we had those figures, we notified those members of anyone who had a potential Alameda exclusion on the thought that we wanted to put you on notice just in case we were required to do something pre-PEPRA, because, and I'll let Ashley explain this better, that the PEPRA legislation, the 1/1/2013, does not have anything to do with these Alameda in-kind exclusions. It's about the definition of compensation and how that kind of pay is not, the Supreme Court has now said that's not compensation. It never was. It never should have been excluded. And so that was the thinking of, it never should have ever been excluded, that it might have to go back to inception. And again, we were being overly broad in how we put that out there, just because we were trying to avoid the alternative of saying, no, you're fine, and then finding out that we might have to tell you you're not fine. So hopefully this resolves this slightly for you, and I'll let Ashley chime in on it.
And I'm happy to clarify even a little bit further on the Alameda exclusion, just from a legal standpoint. The Supreme Court rejected the notion that this retirement board has the authority to include in compensation earnable something that is not compensation. And therefore, if people were receiving in-kind benefits, so for example, they were receiving a healthcare plan as part of the benefits they received, that's an in-kind benefit. That's not cash in your pocket. And the Supreme Court said, we reject and disapprove California case law that existed previously, that's been referred to as Gelfi footnote 6, that said anything to the contrary. The current Casera sort of implementation right at this particular moment in time would apply that judicial statement to people who retire on and after July 30th, 2020. But as the Chief Counsel correctly pointed out, if a different assessment were made by or ordered by a court, that somehow you'd have to go back to an earlier date, it could go back to the beginning of time, because that's how compensation has always been defined in Searle. The current approach includes a much more limited group of people because it applies as a judicial change in law effective July 30th, 2020. I hope that helps.
Thank you. I think I understand what you're saying. I'm not sure I agree, but I guess this will be something for perhaps a future meeting on how you can read a decision that had nothing to do with people who were already retired and try to transform that into some kind of general statement to where you can look back. Heck, there's probably people who've been retired 20 years, and you could look back and probably find something that might, cause an Alameda exclusion here 20, 25 years later. So I'm sure we'll be discussing that if this goes further. But I assume what this means, though, at least from what we can tell now, these non-authorized benefits could be cut off, I guess, after 2020. And then the other issue is, do you retroactively go back and try to collect 20 years of retirement payments from people? Thank you. That's all I have for now.
Okay. Thank you, Mr.
Sayed
Loeb.
Sadruddin.
Okay, state your
Sayed
first name.
Sadruddin.
Slow down. What's your first name?
Sayed. Last name is Sadruddin.
Okay, Mr. Sabardine, you have the floor. Go ahead.
I have a question regarding the Alameda exclusions and the resolution that your board adopted at the last board meeting. In section 2, item 2 says the Alameda exclusions will not apply to individuals that retired after July of 2020. My question is, 2 questions. One, in your exhibit B, the table that on page 16, 17, and 18, the table has the heading of Alameda exclusion. Are those 3 pages the entirety of the Alameda exclusions? And then how does your resolution apply to those Alameda exclusions, or your language? What is the plain English meaning of the impact of that section 2, item 2 for retirees before July of 2020 with respect to the Alameda exclusions?
Can we add that to the list, Dominic?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Sabardine, thank you. We will add that question to the list. Next public comment, please. State your first and last name, please.
Tim Coffrin.
Mr. Coffrin, please go ahead.
Sir, I'd like to just make comment regarding the pilot certificate pay series. I believe it's 7 items within that series. This affects KLEA bargaining unit. And I understand that the determination is that it will only affect PEPRA employees, but I think some background on this is important for the board to make a final decision. This was not given as an incentive pay per se. This was recognized as being to rectify a working out a classification situation. And the short of the story is I completed the staff report on that, and I have that available if anybody needs to review it. But the fire department has on within the job classification system has pilot classification, and the sheriff department also has a pilot classification. And what was happening is deputy sheriffs were coming in and becoming pilots in doing those job classifications of both the fire department and sheriff pilots, yet they were only receiving compensation for deputy sheriffs. So it was highlighted and illustrated as to how we were working out a classification, and so this certificate pay series was put in place to compensate those personnel for doing a higher classification job. So I don't know how that affects PEPRA members per se, but I think that should be taken into consideration, as it was put in place strictly to provide the extra compensation and rectify an out of classification grievance that we were going to file at the time. That's all the comments I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coffin. You are aware that there is an administrative appeals process, and if you feel that you were out of classification or maybe paid incorrectly, and that that affects you, you can file an administrative appeal, and they can review that.
Yeah, I do understand that, and this affects nobody right now because everybody here is legacy members, so nobody's affected. I'm just trying to lay the groundwork for the people that are coming up behind us, because this will affect future personnel in the unit. So that's what my comments are towards.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next public comment, please. State your first and last name.
Yes.
State your first and last name, please.
Judy Carbajal.
I'm sorry, say one more time.
Judy Carbajal.
Juvie Carvajal. Please, Ms. Carvajal, go ahead.
Okay, well, this is extremely confusing. So my bottom line question is, how is this going to affect somebody who's been retired for 27 years?
Is that, I'm sorry, ma'am, is that a comment, or are you asking, you want us to put that in the question pool?
I'd like to know the answer to how this is going to affect people who've been retired for years. I still don't see that it's clear.
Well, ma'am, I think it would depend on how you were paid and what pay codes you had, and things of that nature. What they're talking about is pay codes that have been deemed irrelevant from the California Supreme Court. If you would like someone at KSARA to take a look at your pay codes, you can reach out to Dominic, and he can take a look at how you're paid and whether that's going to affect you or not.
Okay, good. All right, thank you.
Can you spell your last name, ma'am?
C-A-R C-A-R-B-A-J-A-L.
Okay, we'll make sure somebody reaches out to you. You should have also got a letter too, whether it's going to affect you or not.
I have gotten no letter.
Okay. Do you have email?
Thank you.
Do you have email, Judy?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
We'll make sure somebody gets in touch with you.
All right, thank you.
You have a good day. Thank you. Next public comment, please. State your first and last name.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
This
Dustin?
public comment we just had kind of echoes my confusion a little bit too. I confirmed what I thought was the position of the board with respect to who is carved out, so to speak. And then Ms. Dunning, I think, may have corrected that and said something different. And so if someone's retired before a certain date, again, only dealing with the Alameda exclusion, it was now I understand from Ms. Dunning that if they retired before a certain date, there will not be an impact. And then as to another date with respect to PEPRA exclusions, there will not be an impact. Can that be clarified? Because it may help others in guiding their own public comments and potentially questions.
Ms. Dunning, you want to take that?
I'm happy to. And can I get a nod from Jennifer that I can go forward?
Okay. You can nod from me.
Okay.
How's that?
All right, I'm going to state this very clearly. If you retired before July 30th, 2020, the Alameda exclusion will not affect you under the board's current resolution. If you retired before January 1st, 2013, none of the changes will affect you because the PEPRA exclusions apply only to people who retired on or after PEPRA's effective date, which was January 1st, 2013.
Does that clear everything up?
Yes.
Really helpful. Thank you.
We should maybe record that and then we can have that. Because that is going to be the most asked question. I think, Trustee Couch, you have a question?
I would like that in writing.
Yeah, that would be good.
For the precise reason, yeah.
So Ashley, when we get done here, can you email that to Jennifer and then Jennifer forward it to all the trustees?
Sure.
Thank you.
And the members?
Okay. Next public comment, please state your first and last name. I got somebody because I can hear
Laura
them.
Lopez.
Miss Lopez, you have the floor. Go ahead, please.
In regards to the last comment made, I'm not sure if it was clarified if that would be posted on KSARA's website for members. Could you please do that so that the language is clear and set forth for the members and others concerned about it? Because I too am confused regarding the legal language pre and post and PEPRA and the Alameda decision. So the clearer you can make it in layman's terms, the better for all of us.
Will do. Thank you, Ms. Lopez.
Awesome. Thank
Dominic,
you.
we make sure that's on the website today.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I like pictures personally. I'm trying to envision some sort of a visual representation that we can make that will accurately capture this, and then we will.
We could make a flow chart. We could just do a flow chart real quick. If you retire before this date, does not affect you. If you did retire here, it does affect you. You know, we could do it that way. Just a suggestion. Thank you, Ms. Lopez. Next public comment, please state your first and last name.
William Little.
Mr. Little, you have the floor. Go ahead, please, sir.
I apologize ahead of time. This has been asked and answered. I've had connectivity issues and live out of state and can't group up. I've received 2 emails. One, I believe, was for the alt pay, and then one was my own. I was able to track the pay codes. I did get a potential impact stating that it was a specific code, VB. However, it was said when you look it up for legacy members, it's included and will still be included. So I'm confused as to why that email was sent out. If there was some filtering software that generated that email or what the deal was, but a lot of people got it and it's created a lot of confusion.
Okay. You'd have to have somebody reach out to you and look at your codes, but we can do that. We make sure that Mr. Little, someone looks at his codes and reaches out to him and make sure it wasn't an error.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Little. Next public comment, please state your first and last name. No more? One last chance. Any public comments? Please state your first and last name.
Yes, Kristen Bush.
Mrs. Bush, go ahead, please.
Hi, yes, I'm calling on behalf of the employer, and I have a question on the appeal process. So if there is a code that is currently affected and for PEPRA members, we wanted to know if the appeal process can be done as a blanket appeal process by the employer, or does it have to be each individual employee who's submitting their own appeal for that?
You mean like can you do a class action? All one group at one time?
Yes, essentially.
Yeah. I would imagine you could do it like that. Jennifer, how would you like them done? Individually or as a group?
I think we were envisioning individual administrative appeals once the designations were made and once the determination as to how much was going to be refunded or owed on an individual basis. But this situation, I guess, is unique in that we have, classes of groups all using a certain pay code. We are going to continue discussions with plan sponsors who have concerns about these designations to see if there's anything that we did not know now. I feel like we've researched and investigated as best we could with the information we have. We've made appropriate designations, but so to answer your question, I think it would be appropriate to reach out directly to Casera staff and talk through it. If there's still something you disagree with, then I think we can handle an employer. I guess we can ask Leslie. I'll get some input for you. An employer admin appeal based on a specific designation of a pay code as opposed to individuals.
Right. And Jennifer, I can call you and let you know what the pay, it's one in particular that we kind of wanted to question. So I can reach out to you directly on that.
Sure.
Hey, thank you very much, ma'am. We will move on to our next public comment, please. Please state your first and last name.
Susan Wells.
You got too many of you. One at a time, please. I heard Wells. Susan, is that you, Susan Wells?
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Wells, you have the floor, please. Go.
Is it me? Okay, I just have a question. If the remittance that were sent at the end of August are what they were, is a person to assume then that they won't change going forward, or is there's going to be more action at a future board meeting potentially that could change a retiree's benefit. So in other words, if they got their benefit in August and it wasn't any different than it was in July or any other month, is it safe for them to assume that it's not going to change going forward?
Jennifer's shaking her head no. So just we want to do
Okay.
a quick sentence, Jennifer, on that.
So we have not made any of the prospective corrections. So everybody's
Great. Okay.
check is the same as of August 30th.
Got it. Okay. Thank you so much. I'll keep listening. Thanks.
Thanks, Susan. Have a good day.
You too.
Next public comment, please. First and last name.
Rafael Ruano.
Mr. Rona, is that correct?
Ruano.
Ruano, okay.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, sir.
I'm an attorney from the law firm of Goyer and Associates. We represent the Employee Association of the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District. I submitted a letter on behalf of the association for your consideration yesterday, on September 8th, so I'm not going to repeat the substance of that letter, but I do wish to reiterate that we're asking the board and KSERA to reconsider its classification of the district's cafeteria pay as a compensation earnable or reclassification out of compensation earnable category. You do have in your documents that are in the board packet a letter from the district. We concur with the district's position on the cafeteria pay. So you actually have a situation here where both the employees and the employer at issue are concurring on the issue of whether or not this should be compensation earnable. I'd also like to point out, and I think that this is part of the frustration that many of our members are feeling, that the district has paid into this pension plan and this compensation. So have the employees for years in good faith, and those that have retired are now receiving a pension that has been paid for by those contributions. So any change at this point we feel is being taken too quickly, too rashly. There are plenty of misunderstandings about what's going on, but I think there's also some substantive disputes as to which, if all of these compensation codes should in fact be reclassified. And in the event that there is a good faith dispute, I would encourage patience and a little bit of time to be given for a full evaluation and involving all the stakeholders, so that we don't rush into making changes and all of the related issues that go with it, whether it be over or under payments and reimbursements and so on and so forth, recalculations, so that we can fully understand what the issues are. So at any rate, our employee association is asking at the very least for more time. We do believe that our position on the cafeteria pay, along with the district, is correct and legally defensible. But we also believe that at the very least, additional time should be given before these changes are put into effect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rono. Next public comment, please state your first and last name. I know Trustee Couch, I was just told you had your hand up. My apologies. You want to jump in here?
I was just going to ask if there's a short, simple, plain language answer to this, and if there is, to put it on our website as well. How will people make an appeal? That's gotten some discussion today. Who do they appeal? To whom do they appeal? How do they appeal? And what's the process to hear that appeal and make a decision?
Trustee Couch, I'll start on that one. So the way the administrative appeal process works is a member disagrees with some decision and they contact our office and say, I disagree with the way that something has been handled. Then staff initiates a response to that inquiry or that disagreement. If the person still disagrees and they want further consideration, then it goes to general counsel, and general counsel advises me on the issue. And then, we make a decision that is within my scope of authority. If the member still disagrees, then that's where the formal administrative appeal process really kicks in, and then they appeal directly to your board. So there's a multi-layered approach to this where a member just doesn't bring everything straight to your board. Staff has the opportunity to vet it and to work it and to apply the law and to respond to the member so that we have every opportunity to resolve the issue before we bring it to your board. It only comes to your board once it has escalated for quite some time and the issue is not resolved to the satisfaction of the member.
Thank you. And once the decision has been made, how long does the member or the retiree or the active member have to make that appeal?
I would have to check with counsel. Counsel, do you remember? I haven't seen one of those forms in a while.
Usually we send out a letter advising the member, and that was the intention, that is the intention here too, is that we will send a letter out advising the member, you will be impacted by X or Y or Z. And then that letter will include a copy of the administrative appeal policy. It will include the timeframes, which is usually around 60 days.
Okay.
And so it will include the letter that goes out advising the member that they are now affected and we are about to take action. That letter gives them all they need to know about how to go through the process. So I would recommend against just simply filing those now, because we're it's probably a little bit.
I get it.
Wait till they get the letter.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, David, I know that took a while for me to get to you.
That's okay. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Next public comment, please state your first and last name.
Sayed Sadruddin.
Is this Mr. Saverden?
Yes, I just have hopefully a quick question regarding the appeal process.
Okay, make them quick because I already gave you the opportunity to speak once, so let's make them brief.
I was just wondering, in your appeal process, it does say that you can appeal a decision made by the staff. I was wondering if your board today accepts the staff's recommendation with respect to exclusions and categorization of various K codes. Is that still appealable?
That's a good question.
Even though it's a board action.
Is that something you want to answer right now, Jennifer? I would assume the answer would be yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Next public comment, please state your first and last name. I'll go one last time. Last opportunity for public comment. Okay, hearing none, I'm going to return back to the board and open it back up for board discussion or a motion. Any board members? Trustee Robinson. Sorry, I just saw your hand.
Hey, Chairman Trustee Kratt, I object to the consideration of the motion to take appropriate action as advised by staff on September 9th, 2020 on the proposed designation of special pays.
Okay. I don't think we have a motion on the table yet, do we? No, there's no motion on the table yet.
Well, that was an objection. So
okay, well, you said object to the motion. That's why there's no motion on the table.
I objected to the consideration of the motion. So generally, it's not debatable. It's just whether or not my objection stands.
Duly noted. Any other board member have any questions or comments on this?
Point of order, respectfully. There's supposed to be a quorum. There's supposed to be a vote for that, Chairman.
Is there supposed to be a vote for that, General Counsel Jennifer Zari?
We don't follow strict Robert's Rules of Order, so we don't generally have objections to the consideration of an agenda item. It is agendized for board's motion or appropriate action. If the motion fails, the motion fails. If it passes, it passes. But we don't generally have a motion on an objection to consideration of a motion.
Point of information. So pretty much in our policy, administrative policy, it does say that we will refer to the Robert's Rules of Order in the absence of policy guidance. So how do we move forward here? Because I did just present a question or raise an objection, which generally, according to the Robert's Rules of Order, people would either support the objection and so that we do not consider the motion, or they would support moving forward with the motion. So that's Robert's Rules of Order. So at this point, how do we move forward commensurate with our policy?
Trustee Robinson, you might consider making a motion to continue the matter effective immediately with no further consideration at this point in time. You might make a motion to that effect.
A motion to continue the matter, lay on the table, effective immediately.
Okay, I have a motion on the table from Trustee Robinson. Do I have a second to Trustee Robinson's motion? And give me a second so I can look. Trustee Couch, are you?
I have a question about the motion. Are you suggesting, or is the motion saying it's just sort of an open-ended deferral? Is there any intent to bring this back with any sort of, do you want the staff to do any type of work in the meantime? What's the intent of the motion? More specifically, I guess.
Okay, apologies.
No problem.
Motion to lay on the table and refer to staff and the admin committee for further consideration.
Okay.
Motion to lay item 19 on the table and refer to staff and admin committee for further consideration.
Can I ask a follow-up to that, Chairman?
Go ahead, Mr. Couch.
I want to know from staff, you heard a lot, what I heard a lot of was, how do we object, how do we file an appeal, rather, to any decision that might get made? How long does staff think they need to go through what you heard today? Maybe there's others that you've received in writing, and do you think you've done that already? Do you need some more time? Would you appreciate some more time? What would you need? A month?
Yeah, so Trustee Couch and Robinson and the full board. So I was prepared to go through and offer a whole bunch of comments to some of the questions that were posed. So I think it might be helpful to spend a little bit of time doing that. General Counsel might have some other opinions. I think this very much warrants some further discussion and some more consideration at this point in time. However, you do have a motion on the table to just continue the matter or refer the matter to the admin committee. I don't think that's the best course of action at this point in time. You might ultimately decide that when we discuss it a little bit more, but there's a motion on the table and I want to respect that at the moment.
Well, I won't second the motion because I'm interested in what your comments are.
Okay, so I have an amended motion from Trustee Robinson on the table. Do I have a second to Trustee Robinson's motion?
If there's no second and Dominic makes his comments, can Trustee Robinson make that same motion again? The answer is no, Jennifer. Can he second a motion that's made by someone?
Cannot make that particular motion again. If his motion fails, it would have to be made by someone who voted against the motion.
Well, what if there's no second and there's no vote?
And it dies for lack of a second, right?
But the question is, could he then make the same motion again after comments are made by Mr. Brown, or after whenever at a later time in the meeting?
I don't think so, on the same theory.
Okay.
Okay.
But he could vote on it if somebody else made it.
Got it.
So it sounds like you might want to make it then, Trustee Couch. All right, I'm gonna, one more time, do I have a second to Trustee Robinson's motion? Okay, hearing none, motion dies. Open back up for comment. Dominic Brown, would you like to make some more comments on this?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to. So with regard to a lot of the comments and questions that were posed, I'm going to do a run through on these and do the best that I can. So there was a comment made regarding mandatory or voluntary overtime in this case. So overtime is strictly excluded by the law. So there's really no consideration as to whether overtime or on-call or availability were mandatory or whether they were voluntary. Now, built-in overtime is a little bit different. Built-in overtime, which is specified in some sort of MOU or something like that, that can be excludable. And so if we have a member that says, well, in reality, my overtime was part of my regular schedule because it was built in for me, then that is something that would require additional consideration. And we might go back to the plan sponsor and ask that perhaps they create a different pay code and resubmit payroll information for that individual or something like that. So that would be part of the administrative appeal. Is I would envision us as staff going back to the employer in certain cases and saying, hey, this member is saying this. What do you say about this? Can you amend your payroll records? Do you agree or disagree? That would be step one before we bring your board something to change it, because your board is making determinations on pay codes that are used by a variety of people in a variety of specifications, different job classes, perhaps even different employers in some cases. And so that's just one of the difficulties that we are dealing with. But strictly speaking, overtime is excluded.
I'm gonna jump in here for a second because I want to touch on that. We have this problem in our department. And I am also going to say I agree with the other gentleman about the dog care. I mean, that like you take care of it 24/7. So to say it's not, you don't like you only take care of it like 8 to 5 or whatever. I disagree with that. So I think some of these need to be looked at, including assignment pay, because from what I understand from Jennifer, is that assignment pay is kind of like sometimes they do that when you're a temporary deal, but we've got guys in our department who've been there for years. So that, to me, seems to be the course of usual duties. So I do think there needs to be some things that are looked at in some of these codes. I do realize the board's going to have to move forward with this, but I also realize that we may have to audit some payroll records and see what's kind of going on and peel a couple layers of the onion back so we can understand for the employee what is really transpiring in their job.
Yeah, for sure. So let me keep going here. So the Alameda Exclusions. So this whole situation is very fluid, and we're trying to apply the law and understand these things on the fly. So with regard to the Alameda Exclusions, I want to make sure I have clarity on this issue. So for people that are retired, they will not be impacted if they retire prior to July 30, 2020. However, if they are still active or deferred, then the application would go back to inception, and we might be looking at issuing refunds for collection of contributions back to inception. Ashley, is that correct? She's nodding her head. Yes, that is correct for actives for Alameda Exclusions.
Actives and deferreds, correct.
Actives and deferreds. Okay, very good. So clarity is emerging the more that we talk about these issues, because they are very, very confusing. So with regard to the other issues, so the problem with the canine care is this. We have a written MOU that says that it is for care of the dog on off hours. And we have a law that says payments for additional services rendered outside of normal working hours are excluded. So if an officer is required to take care of the dog 24 hours a day, council has advised us that should not be construed as to mean that their normal working hours are 24 hours a day. So that's the problem. If somehow it could be understood that the canine care is actually a certificate and they are like certified in care of a canine, then perhaps it could be allowable if it was a certificate pay. But again, it says directly in the written MOU that it is for care of the animal on off hours, which means that it's one of those sort of mixed use kinds of codes that we were talking about. Now, could that MOU be amended? Could it be written differently? Perhaps. What exactly are they being compensated for? We are matching up the practice and the written MOU to the law and making determinations based on that. So that's the difficulty with the canine care.
There is one way that you could fix that, and that would involve the county. Sure. And they would have to make their own line classification of, and if I get this incorrect, forgive me for all the deputies out there, but sheriff's deputy canine, and if you have your own line, your own pay, or fire medic, you have it, your own fire helicopter medic, you have that on your own line, and that fixes everything. Is that correct?
Yes, if it is, we call that roll it into base pay. That's just the terminology we use. If you roll it into base pay and it becomes a unique item number with its own job description with that included, then that is published on a publicly available pay schedule, and that can make it allowable. So again, there's some things here that are subject to negotiation. It is not our place at KSARA to negotiate at all. We do not negotiate. We're matching up what it says to the law and saying this is how it is today. If somebody wants it to be different, the door is open to make it different.
David's got his hand up. I knew I was going to spark a comment. So go ahead.
Are you telling me that the county or any of the plan sponsors could make that change retroactively
I
for
don't,
your purposes?
No, I don't know about retroactively, but okay. So here's the thing: if they're still active and we make refunds of contributions and interest, and then at some point in the future they roll it back up into base, that could actually be a bit of a win-win for the member employee, because then it could be re-included in their FAC at some point in the future, but they would also get a refund of their contributions with interest for everything that they paid between then and now. So just another factor for consideration. I mean, when we really analyze the mechanics of how these things work, that is one way in which it could work. I'm not making suggestions, just talking through the mechanics of how it works. Jennifer, go ahead.
So at one point I wanted to respond to Mr. Lope's comment on the canine. Also, we had updated the board materials. So the canine care was initially designated as something we thought was outside normal work hours. We moved it over to the mixed use. It still remains excluded as the recommendation, but recognizing that that there might be a situation where the canine officer is getting paid for actually the time at work. They bring their dog to work from the morning till night. Is the pay for that, or is the pay for, as the MOU says, at-home care, which would be outside normal work hours? So again, we moved it to a different category. And as we discussed, mixed use is a situation where there might be part of that work that you're doing could be considered as pensionable, and part of it must be excluded. So right now, the recommended designation is exclude it until we can get information, and that would happen through the appeals process. We would need cooperation from the employer and the employee to show us how it was used, and then we could make those corrections. But we did take further consideration on the canine care.
Trustee Sibley, you had your hand up, sir. Go ahead.
Yes, it's for Jennifer. Jennifer, you used the word recommend. That's an interesting word. That means we have some leeway. And so understanding we have some leeway, there may be things we can do to make some of these work, whereas it's not an absolute.
It is a recommended pay. It is a recommendation on the designation, but I will say that a lot of these are cited as legal authority, and a lot of them you don't have the authority to include something as pensionable where the law says it's not pensionable. I'm not saying that's for sure on all of them, but some of them it's not. You won't have wiggle room on some.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I can continue.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So similar situation with regard to the BOM detail. Certainly, we're sympathetic if they go to BOM school and they get a BOM certificate, and certificate pays can be included. But that's not what it says, and that's not really how it's used. It's more like an availability pay. They don't go from one BOM to the next all day. Like sometimes during their work hours, they have a BOM, and sometimes during normal work hours, they have a BOM, and then they have to respond, and then that's overtime. So again, it's kind of this mixed use where we don't have absolute clarity that we can include it. And so therefore we are sort of forced in a way to exclude it. Now, again, the door is open to draft it differently or to clearly label it as a certificate pay. Now that the Alameda decision is out there, I do expect that certain MOUs will be drafted differently in the future in order to clearly identify which bucket these things are in. But nonetheless, we're having to deal with what does the MOU say, what is the current practice as currently written and as currently practiced, and then make our recommendations based on that in consultation with fiduciary counsel.
And to the extent that the BOM detail is actually some type of allowance or certificate type pay, it would be included for legacy, but it would still be excluded for PEPR members because there is a specific statutory exclusion for any type of additional pay allowance certificate wise for PEPR members.
Trustee Sibley, you got your hand up. I'm sorry.
Yeah, working in the personnel department for a lot of years, we wrote a lot of job descriptions. And some of these, if there's a particular certificate that's needed that most people wouldn't have, such as the guy messing with the bombs, then if that's a different job description, like we said earlier, there's some possibilities there then. In other words, not everyone's going to be in that job description. You're not just a deputy or just an A or B or a C, but you're a bomb guy, then there's some leeway here, I think, depending on if Jennifer tells me no or not. But if we go back to some of these that are unique and we can have it as a special job description, that may solve a lot of problems.
Right. What we learned through this process, there's a little bit of inconsistency in the practice in some of our employers. In some cases, and I'm not picking on any plan sponsor in particular, but in some item numbers, some job classifications, there's already an equivalent certificate one. And as long as the member has that certificate, then they move into an entirely different classification and a different job. If for some reason they let their certification lapse or something, then they revert back to the other one and they lose that certification and they actually change their job description with their job title. It's an entirely different item number in the county, for example. It's an entirely different item number. So there's a little bit of inconsistency in the practice, which became a little bit problematic for us as we go to look at some of these things. Okay, so the next one had to do with San Joaquin and their cafeteria pays. The way that those cafeteria pays are structured, council has advised us, it's pretty clear. Those are very clearly excluded as an in-kind benefit. So we're not exercising any discretion or any flexibility there. Now, in some cases, if they don't use the whole benefit, it can be converted to cash. So perhaps a portion of it could be pensionable. But again, we're talking about mixed use there to where a certain element is. Plus, if it's converted to cash, does that really change the fact that it was created as a health benefit that was convertible to cash? It's a different question. We don't even get there because it is an in-kind benefit in its very nature. So that's the problem that we have with the Alameda exclusions, in particular, San Joaquin and their cafeteria pays. So with regard to the pilot pay, higher classification has its own issue. Again, it might be best. I'm not negotiating. I can't tell the plan sponsors how to run their business, but having a separate certification for people who are certified for pilot is probably a little cleaner way to handle that, and it is excluded for the pensionable compensation folks. For the PEPR folks, it is excluded. So we had another one. They were retired 27 years. Want to know if it impacted them? It sounds like the answer is very clearly no. Very clearly no. Will not impact people retired prior to January 1, 2013 for PEPRA or July 30, 2020 for Alameda. We have clarity on that issue. We'll come up with a picture or something to represent that and put it on our website. Depending on how late this meeting goes, it might be tonight, it might be tomorrow, but we'll get it out there. There was a question about a particular code. A lot of this comes down to the particular code. Which code is in question? Is it an Alameda exclusion? Is it a PEPR exclusion? Which bucket are they in? When did they retire? That's going to be the analysis when it comes down to individual people, and we will do that on an individual person basis. So can the plan sponsor work with us to make some changes to their codes? Absolutely, absolutely. Our door's open. They want to create new item numbers. They want to do different codes. They want to take codes that were out there and segregate a certain portion of their population and resubmit as payroll records, even in the past. Retroactivity, I'm a little concerned about. We'll have to talk to fiduciary counsel about that. But our door's open to make changes, always is, no problem. So the remittance, no changes have been made. We cannot act on this issue without the approval of the board. So the board is considering these things. If the board approves changes today, we will immediately move to implement those changes. If the board does not act, we will not change anything because we don't have the authority to do that without board action. Cafeteria pays, I already talked to. That's all the comments and questions that I think I can respond to from the public comment portion at this time. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I turn it back over to the board for comment and consideration and perhaps action.
Rick, I have a couple questions.
Yeah, jump in, Jordan.
Mr. Chairman?
I'm sorry, sir. The board has the floor.
Okay, I'm sorry. There was a misstatement on the cafeteria plan for the air pollution district.
Mr.
I suppose we'll deal with that.
Board has the floor. Mr. Kaufman, Trustee Kaufman, go ahead.
Thank you. I guess a couple of questions. One on the timing. So I know, or I want Dominic to talk about the impacts of making a decision now versus, say, waiting 30 days. Is it really just that if we wait and don't make a change, that the longer we wait, the more money is going to be impacted, or is there something more about doing it now versus 30 days? Do you understand my question?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you, Trustee Kaufman.
And that's just my first question. So go ahead, but I'll have another one afterwards.
Yeah, thank you for that question. That question is the exact reason why staff worked so hard the last several weeks, was to get an actionable plan in front of your board today. And the reason why it is important to get an actionable plan in front of your board today is because every pay period that this is delayed, the problem gets bigger and the impacts to the members get worse. Now, on the active side, it's probably not that big of a deal. We overcollect one more payment. Well, it's every 2 weeks, right? So if it's a month, it's 2 more payments. Then we have to turn around and refund those. That's not that big of a deal. What I'm really concerned about is the retirees. So if a retiree is currently being overpaid, and based on our very preliminary rough calculations, in some cases, those reductions are going to be substantial. Every pay period that we delay this decision makes the problem worse and makes the amount of money that they have to pay back that much more. And so that's why we worked so hard to get a plan in front of you, because we didn't want to delay and make the impact any worse than it's going to be already. We also took a very careful look at the payroll cycle. So for the payroll cycle, the payroll cycle 8/15 through 8/29 is paid on September 8th. 8/29 through 9/11 will be paid on 9/22. So potentially we could catch the active payroll 9/22 pay date if your board acts quickly. Also, our staff is constantly working on the retiree payroll. So every month we pay retiree payroll. And so our cutoff is already coming up for this month for the September payment. If we overpay September again, that means that we would have overpayments and potentially future collection of those overpayments for an additional month. And so we've already made overpayments because the effective date was now in the past. And so we want to keep those as low as we possibly can to minimize the impacts to our members. This is really done for the member. It might not seem like it, but this was done for the member to minimize the impacts. We can delay, but it's just going to make the problem that much bigger. That's why we work so hard to get the plan in front of you. So I think that answers your first question. If you have more, I'll try to address those.
Go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah, sorry, just to add to on the legal aspect of your initial question, Trustee Kaufman, your board is now on notice of the Supreme Court decision, and that decision became final on August 30. And so Fiduciary Council has talked to you about continuing to do what we're doing now that we're on notice would be perpetuating the erroneous construction of the law, right? And so that's one thing to be mindful of as well.
Thank you. We certainly don't want to be erroneous. My next question has to do with, it sounds like, some of the pay codes are crystal clear. And I don't think, anybody's arguing them. Some basic availability pay type and I forget what the other one's, on call or something. Is it possible, or is it even more problematic to take action today on the specific ones that we know are pretty crystal clear versus the ones that seem to be open to some interpretation and or we know are going to be refuted by members? Does that make it more challenging to sort of split it up like that, to at least maybe address the ones that we know are crystal clear? Now, maybe there's some argument about exactly which ones those are. That's possible, but it seems to me some of them are clear, some of them are open to a little bit more interpretation. Is that a possible way forward to move forward, but also to try and minimize the impact on the ones we know about?
Trustee Kaufman, the short answer is yes, it is possible. It is mechanically possible that we say, hey, let's pull out, codes 7, 8, 9, and 10, right? We'll pull out those ones. We'll take action on all the other ones. Let's defer those. Yes, that is mechanically possible. I'm a little bit concerned about the additional administrative burden on staff and the potential negative impacts to members where they get sort of a mixed message. What if one member has multiple codes and then we go to implement some of the codes but not the other codes? That's why over the last couple of years, we have been bringing to your board batches of codes, and we made those changes on a prospective basis, but not on a retroactive basis yet, because we knew we were building and we didn't want to impact members in one direction. If we knew they had multiple codes and other codes were going to go a different direction, then it's just going to whipsaw these members and they're going to be even more confused and more upset because we keep touching it over and over again in different parts.
Okay, no, understood. And then lastly, so if we were to take action today on all of the codes that are recommended to change, and an employee or group of employees successfully appealed, convinced us that, yeah, they should have continued, they shouldn't have been changed. How is would that member or that classification be sort of reimbursed or held harmless? We just sort of reverse everything and make them whole?
Trustee Kaufman, I would say yes. Staff is not going to be prideful about this issue. If there was something that was not correct when we made a determination, and maybe we got bad info, maybe we didn't ask the right questions, we just didn't understand correctly, and somebody brings us something in the future and we say, oh my gosh, you're right, we'll be more than happy to change it. All we have to do is flip it in our system, do the recalculation. I'm oversimplifying a little bit. It is complex. It is very time consuming. There is a batch element, and then there is a personal touch element where our retirement services manager and her staff, they go through and audit every single file, look at every single pay code and every single pay period and make sure that it is correct before we finalize that and make those changes. So yes, that is possible, and we would be happy to change it if we got it wrong.
And then lastly, so if we were to again go with all the codes that are recommended today, say some people appeal, but we deny their appeal, their next course of action is to sue. Is that accurate?
That's an interesting question. I've heard it said recently that this is the end of the legislation, not the beginning of the litigation, right? This started a very, very long time ago. This is the end of almost 8 years of litigation. Now we're just on the implementation. So somebody thinks we've implemented it just flat out wrong. Could they sue us? Sure, I suppose they could, and I'll defer to our general counsel or perhaps Ashley on what additional litigation avenues might be available to members if they disagree with us.
I don't think they're going to let.
Who's got the background noise? Ashley?
Ashley or Jennifer, do you have any comments on that?
You want to make a comment on that? Either one of you?
the administrative appeal policy, and if we follow something very similar to that, once you exhaust, you call it exhausting your administrative remedies, then you're free to file a writ to the Superior Court, and that's how that would be handled.
And I mean, I would assume that if they went through the administrative appeals process and was continued to be denied, I'm reasonably sure then they would sue again. And I'm not sure how. I assume our position is very solid on these, based on not just general counsel, but Ashley and fiduciary counsel and all of that. That those are our positions are accurate. But I don't know. I guess that's more of a comment than a question. I'm just trying to understand and foresee how it plays out, depending on how we approach this and how we vote.
Maybe I should step in here just to because Dominic asked me to, and Jennifer. What the board is doing here is applying the law as stated by the California Supreme Court. That's the court that has that is the highest in our state. It's the one with the ultimate authority to interpret the statutes that apply to Casera. The Superior Court in Kern is subject, of course, to what the Supreme Court has said on these points. And one of the points that the Supreme Court said very clearly is that local public retirement boards have their authority may be plenary under the Constitution, but they are required to follow the statutes that apply to them. And so, yes, of course, people have retained their right to sue the retirement system. All they need is the filing fee in order to do that. But you as fiduciaries who are governing this retirement system have the obligation to follow the statutes and case law that apply to you. And that's what you're doing. So I'll just leave it at that.
And I understand that, but at the same time, the Supreme Court didn't list 5,000 different codes specifically, pay codes specifically. They had to make some generalizations because every plan has their own, or every sponsor has their own specific code. So clearly there is some interpretation here that is required.
Right. And what they said was that the statutes when talking about the Pepper exclusions, that the legislative changes to the definition of compensation earnable in 2013, effective January 1st, 2013, must be applied. And that's where you as a board need to implement them. They use language that has been cited here, the additional payment for services rendered outside of normal working hours. The pay codes that were litigated were standby on-call type pay codes. But then the question comes to exactly the ones that your staff has been wrestling with, which is when you look at an MOU, are you looking at a pay that is provided for services rendered outside normal working hours or not? To say, well, 24 hours a day, I'm actually doing my job, and so those are my normal working hours, is a non-starter. Nobody works 24 hours a day. That's not normal working hours.
I'm going to disagree with you. Yeah, they do. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Ashley. And I
Your staff has been working 24 hours a day of late.
You're wrong. No, there are people that work 24 hours a day.
Okay, well, I think that the cases, such as the city of Pleasanton, where the employer and the employee both thought a particular pay item was pensionable, and the retirement board said, no, it's outside normal working hours, the court agreed with the retirement board statement about what is outside normal working hours. So it's those are the parameters within which you work, the statutory language, and On the Alameda exclusions, you're dealing with a different provision, not PEPRA, but rather the Supreme Court statement that it has to be cash available paid to the member in order even to start the analysis of whether it could be convertible.
So I have one more comment and then I will be done.
Okay, and then
pass it along.
Because he's waiting like 25 minutes. David and then Dustin. Right. Go ahead, Jordan.
Thank you. So the other sort of thing that has been brought up today is that there is the potential for plan sponsors to change their pay scale in some way or negotiate between the sponsor and the union to make something that is excludable now includable. And so my comment on that is again, maybe a possible way forward is to split it out. And I apologize if it is administratively more difficult, but I feel like that may be a burden that we have to bear. I don't know. And I say we, but maybe exclude those things that are possibly open to negotiation between the employer and their unions or whatever, and say, okay, we could delay those for 30 days or 60 days and give them the opportunity, but say this isn't an open-ended thing. You either get it done and get it done quick, or it's not going to happen and it will be implemented. So that is my last comment. Thank you.
Okay. Trustee Couch, thank you for patiently waiting for the third
That's okay. Let's let Dustin go first.
Okay. Trustee Dodgen?
I'm trying to figure out a way where we can immediately comply with the law. We rarely get strong recommendations from both council and staff. And I'm seeing that we're getting a relatively strong recommendation on this, but I'm also seeing that there may be some gray area. So I just wanted to know from an option perspective, I think there might be at least, whether there's gray area on some of the codes or the ability to recharacterize them, whether we could leave those out. And I know that's already been suggested, but if we could actually make a motion today to say, okay, for the stuff that's indisputable, we're just digging a bigger hole. Now we're violating the law. For the stuff that there's something to talk about, can we suspend that and immediately, have staff proceed as appropriate to identify those codes and to bring it back to the full board or to administrative committee and the executive director's discretion? Is that a motion we can make and comply with the recommendations we're getting from council?
Dustin, could I ask you a question on that? Is that something you would almost want for the ones that what I would call marginal? Maybe even refer it to the admin committee, because you might want to, it might be helpful to have people that work in those positions be able to put some input in. See, like just now, we just got into a debate where people don't work 24 hours a day. Well, if that's the case, I'm going home tonight and the fire station can be empty. But there are people that work 24 hours a day. And this is why having people that work in those positions, it might be good to get some of their input. But I'm just suggesting that, Dustin.
That's kind of in the line of what I was thinking. I don't have a good handle on which ones are wobblers, as they say. I don't know. So I couldn't articulate that in a motion, but if I can make a vague motion that was enforce the things the staff believes are indisputable and suspend the ones that aren't and immediately get it figured out through admin. Can I do that, Jennifer? Is that enough clarity to move forward today?
I was going to identify those codes because I think staff has the best insight onto those codes that are not, that we have dug into the most, I guess, and that would be described as the mixed use. Would you like me to identify those quickly?
No, but with respect to those are the ones that we can set aside?
Yes.
Okay.
Mixed use and cafeteria pays.
And I'd be more concerned about being over-inclusive of the items that are enforced immediately. So again, is that vague direction enough? Knows what to do and we'll get this handled?
I think if you phrase it in terms of approving the The recommended designations, with the exceptions of those designated as mixed use pays and cafeteria pays, and direct staff to bring back the mixed use and cafeteria pays for further discussion.
So
can I ask you a question, Dustin? Specifically related to yours, and thank you for being much more articulate than me as usual. The two that you said, the mixed use and the cafeteria, does that also include pay codes that could be negotiated and changed? Do those two categories automatically include those ones as well? Does that make sense?
Yes, the mixed use. That would be the mixed use, the ones that
okay.
A portion in and a portion out that could be broken out if the employer chooses to do so.
Okay, thank you.
And if I'm not, I mean, one of the benefits of how the statute, as the SERL has set up this board, is that there are county employees on this board that can speak to it. I'm obviously not as familiar with what might be a wobbler, and I'm using that term now. So if there's any other board member that says, you know, I also want to include this, I mean, this would be a good time. I'd be amenable to amending the motion. I don't know if I've made the motion yet, but I will make the motion. I'm open to amending it to include other pay codes that I just that I'm not able to articulate. But that's my motion. Let's immediately institute it as to the ones that are indisputable, and we'll come back to the ones that we need to really hash out through the admin committee.
I have Trustee Robinson's hand up now. Sir, go ahead.
Wait.
No, I'm
you
sorry.
before me, Mr.
Sorry.
Couch?
David, I stepped on you. Go ahead. Trustee Couch.
That was a vague enough motion that I think I want to second it.
Is that a second?
I think so, but I want to make sure. Here's the one a couple of them I don't understand. And I think it was Mr. Cawthorn, Tim Cawthorn mentioned this. He got, or someone got, some sort of additional line item pay for being a pilot, but that's being excluded. That's not being excluded.
For PEPRA only, it's excluded.
Yes, it's not excluded for legacy. It still remains included for legacy, and he was speaking on behalf of PEPRA members because it will be and is by statute, certificate pays are excluded for all PEPRA members. And the county is aware that to the extent they want to pay their pilots this extra pay, they are going to have to roll it into a base pay for their PEPRA members.
So if that's what we want to do, that's our solution to that. So we're going to have to okay. And the cafeteria plan, you're also suggesting, and in Dustin's motion, that is excluded from pensionable pay. Is that right?
Excluded because it is not compensation. However, to the extent that cash was received, that portion potentially is includable, but we don't have that data.
I thought they got cash and they bought their benefits with it.
So I'm not talking about the county plan. I'm talking about the San Joaquin cafeteria plan.
Okay.
That's the cafeteria pays that I have referred to and referenced for Trustee Dodgen's motion all relate to the San Joaquin pays.
And theirs would not be included. I'm not familiar with how theirs worked. I should be, but I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, it's different than the county. It's different than the county. The county pays cash to the member, and then they can buy benefits or not buy benefits. The San Joaquin program works differently. People sign up for programs, and then the money is paid directly to the third-party provider, but they include it on their pay stub for purposes of including it for the pension and taking retirement contributions on it. But the money flows very differently than the county.
It's a mandatory health insurance benefit. And so that's really the difference. County employees pay their health benefits. They just pay their premiums. San Joaquin, they get paid and then they pay their premiums, and then that amount that they get paid for those premiums is pensionable.
So they're they're actually being penalized for being in a mandatory program.
They're not being penalized. If you want to consider,
It's not pensionable.
we're excluding it because it's not compensation, is what the court said. It's not in kind, is not compensation, or the value of an in-kind benefit was never intended, or the board does not have this discretion to include those. That's why it's being excluded.
Okay.
And I am going to, at the end of our board discussion, our gentleman that butted in about the cafeteria plan, I am going to let him make his comment, but we're going to get,
thank you.
We're going to get done with board comment first. I got to do it in order. And I think I had Trustee Robinson's hand up before I had Trustee Gonzalez. So Trustee Robinson, go ahead.
Yes, just for clarity from Mr. Brown, could you let me know if like the actuarial studies and evaluations, things like that, as well as like annual contributions from members, is that all available in like the comprehensive annual financial report, or is it like on the website? How can members access that at all times, or do they need to request it from you?
So our evaluation and our CAFR are both on our website, Trustee Robinson. The 2020, for the year ended June 30, 2020, that CAFR is being created right now. So I did already talk to our actuaries. Our actuaries are very tuned in to what's going on with all the systems, which is many of their clients, and this Alameda decision. So because the evaluation is already so far underway for this year, none of the Alameda changes will be reflected in the June 30, 2020 valuation. However, they are on notice that this will impact future valuations. So the earliest that you might see impacts of this and remeasuring the liabilities and all of that would be effective for June 30, 2021 valuations done by the actuary.
Okay. So if somebody just wished to conduct a little research on their own, see if things were accounted for or not, in the past or present, then they could just access the website and get that stuff right there.
Yeah, the CAFR and the valuation are out there.
Okay, great. Thank you.
They can also check their own personal pay records on the KSARA member portal. They can go in there and see all of their member history, every pay period in which pay codes were included as pensionable compensation or comp earnable by pay period.
One more question, Mr. Brown. And if they're having trouble with their passwords, getting into the website and so that they can access it, how would they go about securing that?
So I would start by emailing administration@ksara.org. One of our people will be in touch with them very shortly to get them signed up and straightened away.
Thank you, Trustee Robinson. Next, I have Trustee Gonzalez.
Yes, so I'm hesitant to pull out any kind of like pay codes, kind of parse it out kind of that way, just because, it does seem like there are some fairly strong cases for some of these. And like I said, we'll just be perpetuating. But of course, if that's the direction the board goes, then, that's one, it's another thing. But so I prefer to enact, the pay code changes as far as today. And what I would prefer is having our executive director reach out to the employers and the labor unions regarding the issues with the mixed bag kind of cases, so that there can be kind of they can rectify that on their own and kind of pursue those fixes from there. And then it seems like right now we're just deciding on the pay codes and not necessarily deciding on recouping the funds or anything like that at this time, or how we're going to do that specifically. So it seems like we might have, that might be what gives us our window. It's like, of course we are, we can, that we think are recommended today, and then just kind of, use the administrative committee and, that process to maybe slow down on some of these mixed bag cases, or maybe to, just provide that extra time for some of these more confrontational kind of things. So, and then of course, the administrative appeal process is still there, and I don't think that can be really used unless we make some kind of action today that's going to be affecting them. So that's kind of what my preference would be, is to do the actions today and then really work on some of these mixed bag cases afterwards.
Okay, so let's clean this up a bit. I actually have a motion and a second on the floor. And David, did you have a comment? Or you just want to laugh? We need a good laugh.
We might need a little clarification on the motion.
Yeah.
Even though I seconded it.
Let's restate the motion. Can we restate it just so everybody's on board?
Yeah, we're going to immediately implement the staff's recommendation as to those pay codes that are not disputed, and that will accept from it mixed use pay codes and cafeteria pay codes.
You know what? Can I amend that? Can we allow? I know there's. I know our council is extremely sure of their position on the cafeteria pay codes, but I'd like to allow the Air District to make their case to the admin committee or the attorneys to still work together. Can we include or exclude that from the motion, just for that?
I think that's part of it, right?
Yeah. That is part of it.
Those are the two exclusions. One is mixed use and the other one's cafeteria pay codes.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. And then one other thing since we got that clarified, I'm sorry, you broke off. Repeat that one more time. What were the pay codes? Cafeteria and what else, Jennifer?
Mixed use.
Mixed use. All those labeled under the mixed use category in the updated slide deck. It's posted on the and all the cafeteria pays.
Okay, I had a gentleman who wanted to make a comment, and the board had the floor. I'd like to give him the opportunity right now to very quickly talk about, he said there was an error with the cafeteria plan. We're still on here, sir. I would like to hear your comment now.
I'm still here. My name is Philip
State
J.
your first name. State your first and last name, sir.
Philip J.
Okay,
I was
Mr. J, go ahead.
I was the general counsel of the district when it was first formed in 1992. I appreciate your board's direction to basically give a second chance to the cafeteria plans, because the districts is a little bit different than the classic cafeteria plan. They started out with the premise of basically, here's cash, employee, here's cash. However, you have to buy insurance for yourself out of that cash, because otherwise we won't be able to get insurance for anybody. The balance of the money, the amount given was more than enough to buy single party insurance, and there was a balance of cash. As to that cash, there's no strings attached to it whatsoever. You could go and buy a car with it if you wanted to. So it's a little bit different. It's different to say that's an in-kind contribution of any kind. It's at least a hybrid, where some of it was used for a health benefit, but the balance of it was used just for whatever purpose you wanted to use it for. So it was not paid out or converted to enhance a retirement benefit. It was just money. It was money in the pocket of the employees. So I think that needs to be studied in more detail by either staff or the administrative committee, and I appreciate your consideration on that.
Thank you, Mr. J. And I hope, I understand. I just have to go in order with the board. That's why when the board has the floor, I got to let the board, but I was going to come back to you. So thank you for your comments, sir.
I appreciate that. I'm still so used to sitting with boards and interrupting them and stuff. I have to act more like I'm a member of the public now.
Well, this was really easy before we had COVID. And now this is like, you're trying to manage all these screens on here. So it's tough for me. Thank you, Mr. J. Have a good day. Okay. Thank you. So we're back to we have a motion and we have a second, correct? And do we have any further board discussion? Because otherwise we have to take a vote on this.
Chairman, I don't remember that Trustee Couch actually seconded that motion. I think he was considering seconding, and he had a point of information or parliamentary inquiry at one point.
I'll second. You're probably right about that. I'll second though.
Okay, I have an official second. Now,
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, I believe this is implied, but I'm going to make it explicit. So for the codes that your board is considering for action right now, we're talking about PEPRA exclusions effective date August 30 and Alameda exclusions effective day July 30 on a go-forward basis. Is that correct?
That was my motion.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
okay. Amy, let's do this.
Okay, we'll take a roll call vote, please. Couch,
Yes.
Dodgen,
Yes.
Franny,
Yes.
Gonzalez,
Yes.
Kaufman,
Yes.
Kratt,
Yes.
Robinson,
No.
Skidmore, Skidmore, I can't hear. Did she say something?
She's not talking.
She was there, but she must have left.
She's there.
She's
Trustee
there.
Skidmore, we couldn't hear your vote.
Is that an abstention?
Yes.
Yes? Did she say yes? Okay, thank you.
I heard a yes.
Thank you. Whitesell?
Yes.
8 ayes, 1 no. Trustee Robinson, motion approved.
Okay. I want to thank everybody, staff, Dominic, Matt, Amy, Jennifer, Ashley. I know you guys have put a lot of work into this. This has been a monster. It's taken up a lot of time. And Robert as well. This is probably the longest and roughest item the board's gone through since I've been here in 7 years. So I want to thank you guys. And you still have some more work. So thank you. Item number 20 will be adjournment. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.